All right. Welcome everyone to EUDR Summit 2025. My name is Andreas Naujux. I'm a Senior Product Marketing Manager here at Live.io. First of all, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. More than 1,000 people signed up for this event today, which should make EUDR Summit the largest event specifically addressing EUDR compliance this year, at least that I know of. I will moderate and guide you through the first couple of sessions today. And we have a very packed day with lots of knowledge, great experts. But yeah, let me start by a short introduction why we do this. So basically, why we set up this event. As you know, EUDR enforcement is a bit more than half a year away again. And for many companies, EUDR implementation still poses or is perceived to be a massive challenge for their organization. So we know that there are knowledge gaps among the various stakeholders in the supply chain, and there's uncertainty about potential legislative developments, political changes, and all that. And if you feel like you haven't fully understood everything with regards to the regulation and how to implement it, stay calm, because first of all, you are not alone. And secondly, we've put together this event today to change just that and to bring you the important insights you need to know to get started and also to finish a successful EUDR implementation. So we will have a broad range of sessions today in different formats to keep it entertaining. And what we will do essentially is we will be zooming in over the course of the day. And we have secured a great range of great speakers to guide us through the full EUDR journey today. So we will start with like I said, we're zooming in. We'll start with a bird's eye view of the EUDR in the context of ESG legislation. In the light of recent trends we have seen there, for example, you've all heard about the Omnibus package and also international developments. And we then, with each session, get closer to what it actually needs to become compliant and how to do so efficiently. So that means minimizing regulatory risk, operationalizing sustainability, and even unlocking competitive advantages while doing so. We will have a panel with the experts Rob Shaw from PFC and Constanze Schwitman from the global law firm CMS, discussing the potential and often overlooked cost of not getting compliance right. Then we will have a session with Philip Bubbereta from the international consultancy BDO, who will explain to us how to assess your organization's readiness for EUDR and what to look out for. Then our own Piero Malia will explain to us how to set up a robust roadmap for EUDR implementation. And then we will close the day with, on the one hand, a discussion with one of your peers, Paul Bozuva from the Sheridan Group, which is a large US-based printer for the publishing industry, who will give a first-hand account of their EUDR implementation project. And then finally, to close the day, my colleague Chris Bell, who's a senior product manager at Live.io, will show you how to use Live.io's EUDR solution, TradeAware, to implement the previously discussed items in an extensive demo. Before we get started, a few administrative things. So all sessions today will be recorded and the recording will be made available. So if you need to drop out, it's not a problem, but of course we appreciate you staying. And if throughout the day you want to speak directly already to my colleagues for more information on Live.io's EUDR solution TradeAware, we have prepared a virtual booth. You find it by clicking on the label, on the tab labeled booth when you leave each session. So it will be there throughout the day. Please don't leave now, but my colleagues are ready to take your questions. If you want to continue the discussion after the event today, feel free to always send us a message, but you can also join our expert community on LinkedIn. It's called EUDR Q&A. It's a group of different stakeholders. It's a friendly community where people ask questions and then answer them. So I recommend doing that. Okay, but I'm aware that nobody joined today to hear me talk. Instead, we want to get started with our sessions. And for the first one, for our keynote, I'm very excited that we have gotten Jan Dubal on board from Národní lesnický Institute, the Czech Forestry Institute, which is the competent national authority for EUDR in the Czech Republic. Hi Jan, thanks for joining us. A few words. So by training, Jan is a forester and environmental engineer, leveraging 2 decades of experience in geospatial regulation, EU compliance, and digital forest governance. And if you are active on LinkedIn and follow topics around EUDR, you must have come across him. So for me personally, it's been an invaluable source of knowledge and understanding around EUDR over the past year or so. So to speak, the leading EUDR influencer on LinkedIn. And yeah, thanks Jan for joining us today. And with that, I would directly hand it over to you and to your keynote and start EUDR Summit 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Andreas. Thank you very much for the introduction and introducing me. It's a great pleasure and, of course, great opportunity to start this great event with the keynote. Thank you for this opportunity, and I will share my talk with the presentation. So I hope you can see the presentation now.
It's coming up, yeah.
Perfect, thank you. So in next 20 minutes, I would like to introduce the, let's say, overall situation of the EUDR and also ESG in the content, as Andreas said, in the context of political changes and changes in the, let's say, legislative environment. I have prepared 7 pages in my presentation. I will start, if you allow, with the introduction of the competent authority a little bit. Then I will address the due diligence and its evolution in the legislative systems in the European Union very briefly. I will try to, let's say, frame the EUDR and the ESG regulations in one slide to talk about them, and then to move to the Omnibus proposal and other, let's say, simplifications and effectiveness proposals into the regulations and legislative framework. Then I will, let's say, describe what are the next steps, what is ahead of us, and what is expected from the simplification of the regulations. And I will also add a perspective of the competent authority, what we see as important and what we would like to see. I think that it's necessary to say that I have a disclaimer here. I can't get too much into politics because as a specialist for the Czech Forestry Institute, I need to, let's say, communicate the position of the competent authority. So I will try to get as much insight as possible, but everything will be in line in what's expected right now. In my final remarks, I would add also my personal opinion. I hope that this message will be well received. And now I will continue with next slide. So what exactly is competent authority? So competent authorities are usually governmental bodies, ministries, institutions, or specialized institutes in the member states of the European Union, which are delegated by the legal framework to provide services and duties under the different regulations. In the context of EU deforestation regulations, we have competent authorities that are usually the ministries, but sometimes it's also specialized organizations like our Czech Forestry Institute. The experience of our competent authority is connected with EU timber regulation, because of course EU deforestation regulation is a continuation of previous regulations, EUDR, EU timber regulation, and the FLEGT. And the competent authority is continuously working on the implementation and, of course, enforcement of the regulations. The EUDR, EU timber regulation, is still the part of EU deforestation regulation, so we can let's say follow up on everything that we learned in the previous years. We had many checks under the EU timber regulation that are, let's say, inspections on the operators that were placing the timber on the market of the European Union, and experiences from those inspections are crucial also for, let's say, building on the EU deforestation regulation. We had from 10 to 50 inspections per year. We expect that under EU deforestation regulation, this duty will be much more. We expect many more inspections under EUDR. In our experience, we had joint inspections with other member states, and we also had inspections that were quite unusual. We also had, because we reacted on the substantiated concerns by the NGOs, so these were inspections focused on really risky imports. And we have a court's decision, national court's decision in our favor. So it's not only the experience from the inspections, but also this court decision, let's say, acknowledged that the approach of the regulation and the approach of the competent authority is correct. Under the EU deforestation regulation, there are, of course, other commodities included in this regulation. So we expect that there will be more competent authorities, as let's say, obliged to deliver the duties under this regulation regarding the other commodities. But the framework in the Czech Republic is that the Czech Forestry Institute will be still, let's say, the umbrella of those other competent authorities. I'd like to also add that the Czech Republic was very active participant in creating the EU deforestation regulation, because in 2022, the Czech Republic had the presidency of the European Union. So we were part of the negotiations, and also the adoption of the EUDR was perceived as one of the most important achievements of the Czech presidency. I think that EUDR needs to be perceived as a part of the green transition in the European Union, same as ESG. Same as ESG and the legal acts under ESG regulations and directive, it's the continuation of the previous efforts. Andreas mentioned the changes in the political framework. Interesting enough, when we consider the changes in the political sphere, EUDR, timber regulation, was initially inspired by the legislation in the United States. And it was the inspiration by the Lacey Act, amendment of the Lacey Act in 2010, when the due diligence was, let's say, introduced into the European legislation. It was not only the first time when due diligence was introduced into legislation, but into the European law, but also it was something new for many member states, including the Czech Republic. The EU timber regulation preceded the Green Deal that was introduced in 2018, and I think that EUDR and other ESG legislation make the sustainability framework for the green transition in Europe. And after the changes in the political sphere, the Europe was, let's say, the leader and tried to take the leadership of the green transition with the global impact. Unfortunately, after that, unfortunate events occurred in the political sphere. European Union was facing the United Kingdom cession from the EU, and already in 2020, the full-scale invasion of Ukraine started. So already in 2020, we see first appeals from European institutions towards the changes, towards the simplification and more effectiveness. it's the changes in the political landscape after the 15 years after the introduction of due diligence and 5 years after the Green Deal. And we see that now the approach, the political approach is with the goal to rethink and recalibrate the regulatory framework of the ESG and including the EUDR. In 2024, with the new Commission and with the new European Parliament, we see clearly the political message. And we clearly see that in the Commission's work plan for 2025, the simplifications are clearly designed. EUDR and the ESG interplay is in the, let's say, general due diligence framework with the focus on transparency and reporting. Legal framework on sustainability is, of course, complex and long-term. It's not. It's the system that is very demanding on corporate reporting and disclosures. This is something that EUDR and ESG regulations have in common. EUDR, of course, same as ESG framework, is accompanied or framed with implementing and delegated acts. So it needs to be considered that those implementing a delegated act also include very practical aspects of the implementation. Let's say that ESG regulations and directive more overlap into, for example, finance policies and more general policies of the development of the market. EUDR, in comparison, has very strict goal to reduce deforestation and forest degradation globally, not only in the European Union but also in the partner countries. And EUDR is also specific that it integrates the supply side of the deforestation and the demand side regulation. The demand side is, of course, regulated by the due diligence approach and reporting and inspections and controls by the customs. The real-time impact of EUDR is through the mechanism of customs controls, because the customs administrations play, besides the competent authorities, crucial role, and they have the power to directly impact the trade flows with the interplay of with the competent authorities. Also, from the international perspective, EUDR is aiming to have a global impact. It is perceived, or it was approved as a WTO compliant, yet we need to take into account that the partner countries in many situations perceive the EUDR, let's say, as affecting their internal affairs and approaches, and it is also an important part of the simplifications and, let's say, implementability of the EUDR to have strong partnership with the supply side, with the partner countries. It was already mentioned that we have simplifications now on the table. Simplification of the regulations is very much politically dependent, but I think that after the Council communications, after the communications from the European bodies towards the European Commission, it was acknowledged that the reduction of administrative burden will be specified and focused on the SMEs. So I think that the goal was set. Yet the European Union and the Commission, the member states, still needs to keep on sustainability commitments, because the sustainability is something that is necessary condition for the EU's development regarding the energy strategy, security. So European Commission is considering so-called omnibuses. That means the putting together proposed or already applicable regulations and legislations, and try to adjust them with the goal of simplifications. We see that now under the urgent procedure, the Omnibus started to apply for the CSRD and CSRD. So there is this, let's say, a delay of these directives, let's say part of these directives. And the simplification is aiming through different ways, raising the thresholds under the CSRD and, let's say, narrowing the scope under CSRD. Regarding the EUDR, the urgency was more in the 2024 when the regulation was aimed to take effect. So also for EUDR, the urgent procedure was used to amend the EUDR and delay the enforcement for 1 year. On the other hand, the member states and the Commission agreed that there will be no change in the substance of the EUDR. I think that this is based on the fact that EUDR is really complex, and changing the substance in the regulation would have the consequences for the implementability. So I believe that the changes in EUDR needs to be very careful. And the European Commission decided to make these changes through the simplification of implementation of EUDR, and already taken very practical steps in this direction. So regarding the ESG, we now have so-called stop the clock mechanism. And now the ordinary legislative procedure will start. I think that we can expect that it will take some time. So there are different proposals. I think that there will be a different level of demanded simplification, and on the other hand, let's say keeping the goals of those legislative acts. EUDR chose in the EU deforestation regulation, the way of simplification through implementation was taken. So now it's more on the European Commission, on its let's say implementation team, to make the changes forward. And we see from the last week that the first steps were taken. The European Commission recently published new FAQs and the guidance, and is aiming to simplify or clarify the Annex 1 of the regulation. Annex 1 is mostly focused on HS codes, so it's a very important part of the regulation, and the European Commission has the delegated act prepared now in the consultation. So the so-called FAQs, frequently asked questions, are now perceived as a very important tool for simplifying and explaining the deforestation regulation. Now we see that there were explained some really important points for the operators and for the suppliers from the third countries. We see inclusion of the agroforestry. Now we have, in the new iteration of FAQs, we have another explanation for declarations in excess regarding the plots of lands. We see the proposed simplification in yearly due diligence statements. And we see simplification in the Article 4 regarding the information that is necessary to be passed in the supply chains. Now, I think the most important part is the benchmarking of the countries. That this is now in focus, and the European Commission announced the EUDR committee for the next week. So the Commission will be discussing the benchmarking proposal with the member states, and hopefully the Commission will be able to deliver the benchmarking of the countries in the June 2025. which was one of the, let's say, political conditions for a successful continuation of EUDR implementation, because the benchmarking of the countries regarding the classification into low risk and high risk is important not only for operators but also for the member states and competent authorities, because the level of inspections will be derived from that. Competent authorities, a perspective on what needs to be done is the slide that I try to, let's say, introduce what we see as most important and to what we are trying to achieve at the competent authority. So I think that with regard of today's meeting, the competent authorities very much understand the benefits of technology development. EUDR, I think, was also a great opportunity for the thinking about how we use technologies and, for example, Earth observation. What we see as something to solve is really the complexity of legal framework. So we are also expecting, or we would like to see, development in the technology sector dealing with the complexities of the legal framework. We will see. What the competent authorities, and of course it's also in the interest of the operators, is to setting up value chains and supply chains in the advance to be prepared for the taking effect of the EUDR at the end of this year. But basically, the competent authorities need to focus on really practical aspects of the implementation. I mean, this includes support for the small and middle enterprises, and because, of course, the regulatory framework is complex. We try to provide this to localized and detailed guidance, and this is something that is in follow-up of the guidance and FAQs by the Commission. We are trying to provide technical tools regarding the geolocations and Earth observation. Very important is, of course, cooperation between competent authorities, a European Commission, and, of course, operators and the technology providers. What is necessary is to focus on the risks. I believe that one of the most important is to see the EUDR in the context of the custom procedures. So keep an eye on this in the end of the 2025, and also see the other, let's say, risk that I wanted to mention. For example, prepared environmental crime directive, because EUDR will not only be administrative but also included in the environmental crime. What we need is to focus on protection and security of information in the information system. That is something that is addressed in the implementing act for the information system of the EUDR. And of course, as I mentioned, the engagement with the partner countries, with the third countries, with the supplier side. And I think that this is something also that is under development and on the good way. Okay, I get to my final message. I wanted to end my keynote with something more, let's say, personal, because as Andrea said, I'm also focusing at my work at air observation, geolocations, satellite imagery, and those technologies. I see that these technologies and these approaches are now under, let's say, quick development, and that there are different ways how to address the Earth observation and collection of the data. But I think that we need to take in mind that EUDR has no exception for the small producers and private persons, smallholders. And now those private people, those individuals are becoming the part of the supply chains, which I see personally as a challenge for the implementation, because of course there is a lot of collecting of data. and the smallholders and private persons will be definitely influenced by the implementation of the regulation. I wanted to mention that there is article access to justice in the regulation, but it's a little bit simplified compared to the original proposal because of the legal situation in the member states. But it's on the implementation, how to handle the situation of privacy of the data in the supply chains, and it's already dealt a little bit in the FAQs, and it is something that we need to focus, I believe, in our future work. So thank you very much, and I believe that we still have space and time for some questions.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for your presentation. And we do have some time for questions, and we also have some questions. So that's a great combination. Yes, and so the questions came in through different ways, so I tried to organize them a little bit. But we can start directly. So there was one question just about the proof that there was no deforestation after the cutoff date. So the question is, what sort of proof is acceptable? Will an area photographed to show the site was not subject to deforestation after that date suffice?
Yes, I believe, and it's our approach that we will use the data that are mentioned in the regulation itself. So it's the Copernicus data and data provided by the European Commission in general. So it's the general, let's say, general approach to this. It's not only because the data are free and available to everybody. It's also because the services are improving in time. And Copernicus is now, let's say, offering very good tools in this regard. I'm not saying that perfect, but very good. But I think that it's necessary to say that when there is high risk identified or the situations that requires further examination, it's not that those tools are considered sufficient absolutely. So basically our focus is on the available data from the European Union.
Okay, yeah, I think in the new FAQ there was an extra note that the map by the Joint Research Council is not considered the one and only source of truth, and I think in the end companies need a scalable, accurate method of
Yes.
verifying. And
yes, I would like to point out that the JRC, the organization under the European Commission, published recently a new document about the accuracy and description of the data under EU Forest Observatory, which is based on Copernicus data. So for the further examination, I think this is very good lead. And as you said, I agree that this is described in the FAQ very well.
Yeah. So then there have been a few comments about, again, relating to Omnibus, and I think it's more like an opinion. So basically, on the one hand, somebody wrote EUDR should be included in Omnibus, and then there was a question: are you expecting the Omnibus developments tendency to further delay water down requirements to affect the EUDR? I think you spoke to that. Maybe you can.
Maybe I will address this because the European Commission is communicating very openly with the stakeholders and with the member states at the multi-stakeholder platform in Brussels. The outputs of this platform are available publicly on the Commission's webpage, and the Commission communicated quite clearly that the EUDR will have, let's say, itself approach to the simplification through implementation. So because there was amendment of the EUDR at the end of 2024, we now will see, I believe, and is expected, the simplification through FAQs, guidance, and improvement of the services like information system and EU Forest Observatory.
And potentially the risk classification of the countries to some extent, but then maybe also getting back to that, because what I also read somewhere is if there will be no risk countries, and I think that question is also settled, like at least no risk, but maybe, yeah.
I think that the no risk category was refused in the negotiations at the end of 2024. So because it would really change the substance of the regulation, because the no risk category expected no information gathering necessary for the due diligence. So I don't think that this will be open again. But I believe that the low risk category is the most crucial part of the implementation that is now expected, because of course the benchmarking of the countries is a, let's say, basis for the decision making, not only for competent authorities but for the operators also.
Yeah, but at the same time, it doesn't, the low status doesn't exempt completely from due diligence requirements.
Of course, and you need to pay attention that even the benchmarking will classify the country to low risk. There might be substantiated concerns. There might be situations that will be, let's say, reported by the NGOs. So
yeah, maybe can you explain that a little? So substantiated concerns, what does it mean if one is raised? So as far as I know, every legal person, I think, in the EU can raise such a concern, and then what happens?
I can speak for the competent authority in the Czech Republic. We have experiences with the substantiated concerns, and we always reacted with the inspection. So when we identified that the concern is substantiated and it usually was really well based, we started the inspection, and we also had the outcomes of the inspection. So this is a really important part of the regulation. I think it's clearly stated in the regulation that this will be a tool that will be used in the inspections, and it's not only, let's say, opportunity for individuals or NGOs or anyone else to point to the illegalities, deforestation, forest degradation, but also it is the tool that needs to be taken into consideration in the risk assessment of the operator. So when there will be substantiated concerns in the countries of production, then the operators need to take this into account in the risk assessment.
Okay. And maybe so following to this, because when there's a substantial concern, but also in a standard, let's call a sample check, basically, that you have to perform on a certain amount of the import, basically, of the commodities and products, regulated products. The question is, how are you going to execute the checks on entities? What are the main elements that will be checked by competent authorities? Yes. And how are you going to track the traceability of currently not traceable items? Example, a poster of wooden stir. Okay, maybe the first part, and then we see about the second part.
Yeah. Okay. So the checks under EU timber regulation and under EU deforestation regulation are basically the same regarding the legal framework in the Czech Republic, and I think that it's also similar in the other member states to provide a legal certainty for the operators. We need to follow the inspection code. So we have a legal framework for conducting the inspection. So it's in the administrative procedure, so it's administrative. And we are not only checking the documents, and we are not only exploring the supply chain of the operator, we are not only exploring the due diligence, but we are also giving the operator opportunity to argue and to explain and to use tools in his due diligence to mitigate the risks. So I believe I can say that it's a very open process, and it's open not only in the mean that it has the legal framework, but open also that we really try to examine the meaning of the documents, meaning of the due diligence. And as I said, we already had a court decision in the Czech Republic that was evaluating one of our inspections. It was the inspection on Myanmar timber, so high risk, considering high risk timber. So it was also joint inspection with other member states. So we have a court decision in favor of how the inspections are conducted and how the due diligence is assessed. So this is something that we can follow up on EU timber regulation. And also under EU timber regulation, we already checked the supply chains and also geolocations, because of course timber needs to be legal under EUDR, and the operator needs to prove it also under due diligence under EUDR. So I think that we have experience to follow.
Okay. And you just mentioned geolocations, and there were one or two questions regarding the scenario that if you have a commodity or product from a country that doesn't share geolocation data, and thus you cannot include them in the DDS, how does that work? For example, I think China is an example.
Yes, we are dealing with this. I think that in this case we will follow the harmonization by the European Commission, because European Commission is declaring that the Commission believes that this will not be a problem, but in case that the geolocations are somehow blocked from the political reasons or whatever reasons the country of production chooses, then this should be approached by the cooperation with the relevant country of production. And still, the geolocation is necessary part of the information gathering under due diligence. So I think that this would lead to considering continuation of such imports, I believe.
Yeah, so short answer, basically, the geolocation is required.
Yes, geolocation is crucial requirement in the EUDR. Now with the FAQs, for example, let's say European Commission explained that it's not necessary to pass the geolocation in the supply chain under the Article 4. So I think that this is a great simplification or effectiveness of this approach. But the competent authority needs to have access to the geolocations, because the competent authority, of course, needs to assess the occurrence of deforestation or forest degradation and legality of the commodity. So,
okay, thank you. There's one relatively specific question, but it got 4 votes, so I'll read it out. So, how does the EU cover the following scenario? When EUDR regulated articles are exported to the UK prior to the enforcement date, so now, for example, and there's no due diligence statement needed, held in stock in the UK and brought into the EU market again after the transitional period. Maybe that's something that can be generalized. That's why.
I believe that in this case, the product will be considered as newly placed on the market. Now, in the FAQs is the possibility to use due diligence statement for re-imports, but it's in the situation when the due diligence statement is in place. And so I believe that in this case, the competent authority would be required to have due diligence in full, I believe. But maybe just to point out that this is exactly what is under evolution, because this is exactly the example where the simplification through implementation would be possible. So I think that it's important to take notes about those scenarios. And for the competent authority, I can say that we really need those exact specific scenarios to answer, because general questions are difficult to answer. We need to see specific situations to address them.
And it's a complex. I mean, there will be many those.
I think that the problem for the operator is always that under the due diligence, you need to provide the information and assess the complexity of supply chains. And in this case, when the goods leave the European Union market, it loses the position of the good of the European good. So it's when in this case of re-import without due diligence statement, we will see if there will be simplification on this.
Okay. We are already, I just noticed we're out of time. So yeah, thank you so much. There's so many more questions, which we cannot answer all. We will collect the questions and try to answer as good as possible in future materials that we put out so that we can educate around these things. If you could give 3 words, you can also take 5 advice on for companies getting ready for EUDR. Can you?
I think that it's important to get ready, not only because of the applicability of the regulation, but from the regulatory framework itself. Even the regulation will undergo some changes. The substance will stay, hopefully, because it's really important. It's really important for the European Union to stay on this course. I believe simplification is necessary. It was agreed. So prepare for the regulation and focus on the specific risks and bottlenecks of the regulation. Focus on this, because you can do nothing wrong when you prepare your supply chain and value chain.
Beautiful. Okay, perfect. Then thank you so much. We have to end it here. I have to jump to the next session. Thanks, Jan. And
thank you very much.
Perfect. Ciao.